Ho, ho, ho. Hey, what's up, game theorists? This is Jeremiah and David. Listen, this is going to be a little bit of a short one because David doesn't have his computer for two reasons. David, what are those two reasons?
Windows and 10.
Yes. What do you mean?
All right, so I turned on my computer about a week and a half ago,
Huh?
and I'm like, oh, I was gonna play some computer games, play some Witcher 3, and it goes, yeah, hey, there was a critical service error, we got to reboot, and I'm like, all right, go ahead and do that, and they did it again. And it goes, hey, there's a critical service error, we got to reboot. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you just said that, but do it again, and it kind of infinitely looped that, and it won't stop rebooting, and I tried. System restore. I tried wiping it back to factory settings, like the nuclear option of troubleshooting where you're like,
Yeah.
you're going to lose everything. But I was like, all my games are on the cloud now, so I guess that's okay. It's going to be annoying having to re-download everything. But yeah, go ahead and restart the factory settings. And it goes, oh, sorry, we couldn't do that. I'm like, system restore? And like, no, we can't do that either. I'm like, can you reboot from a previous image? It goes, you never made one. I'm like, touche, I never did make one. That's true. And so, I cannot get my computer working. And so that's going to be my holiday project, is trying to troubleshoot this thing. This is, for all I sing the praises of the PC master race, but this is the dark side of PC master race is so much stuff can go wrong. There's like an infinite number of problems because it's so modular, right? Like there's no two computers are the same.
Yeah.
And so like you and I have almost identical computers, but I just had like one different driver or something, and that made the recent Windows 10 patch, which is obligatory now, you can't stop it from happening, send my computer into a nihilistic spiral of death, and yours is fine.
Nihilistic. It's just like, what's the point of anything?
Nothing works. Nothing matters.
I'll just try again. Fuck it. I'll try again.
Yeah, and the worst thing is these troubleshooting things are they take a long time. Like when you try to reboot your computer, when you try to do a system restore, it takes like 4 hours.
Yeah.
So everything I try, it's like, well, try back tomorrow, see if that works. This is gonna take all night.
That's like putting your car into the mechanic. There's Oxford, just Mississippi, where I live, is the just Mississippi in general, but is the worst. There's nobody uses online reviews here. Like no shit. You go to Google reviews of like any store, and there's like no reviews. There'll be like occasionally there's one, and it's very clearly by the owner because like the customer service sucks. Everything's bad, and you're like, God, that was the worst restaurant I've ever been to. And they're like, yummy food, super hot all the time, and I'm like, okay, that was.
It goes, my restaurant is the best. I mean, his restaurant, not me. I'm not the person who owns it.
His or her. How would I know? Don't know owner. Haha, great food. Yeah, so the customer service here sucks. And when I turn in my car to get, this is easy, right? Like all they had to do was replace the rear view mirror or the passenger side mirror because some college douchebag hit it off and just kept going in the parking lot somewhere. And they go to do that, and then I'm not shitting you. This is what, maybe fourth week where I've brought it in and nothing's happened all day, and then I take it out. Finally, they just did it. Thursday they finished it. It's just everywhere's bad, but it's like that. Like you're just like, I hope it works this time.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't work this time. And can we just compare weeks for a minute? Because here's how my week started. I've been wearing these contacts for 6 months, and then suddenly out of nowhere, my left eye goes, you know what? I think I'm allergic to that. It just like puffs up all red and gross, and so I can't wear contacts. Every time I try and put them in, it just explodes. So I'm wearing these glasses that are about 10 years out of date, so my vision's already blurry. I'm like, oh, I guess I can't play my new PlayStation 4 because it's too blurry. I can't see the screen very well. I'll just play it on my computer. Play The Witcher 3. I'm pretty close to the screen on my monitor, so that'll be fine. Doesn't matter if you're nearsighted. Oh, no, just kidding. My computer doesn't work for no good reason. Critical service error? What is that? That doesn't mean anything. It just sounds bad. It's just like ominous doom bug.
Why is it with like technical issues, for some reason we accept bullshit answers, but like in real life, if you're like, hey, I'm here to pick up my car, and they're like, we had a critical service error. I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, yeah, you just can't have it ever. Yeah. I'm like, what?
And they're like, Google it. I'm like, I don't, like it literally says, it's like when you, underneath it goes, if you want to search for this, type critical service error into your search engine. I'm like, that's so vague.
Shouldn't you tell me?
Yeah. And then I look, and it's like Windows 10 reboot fix from August 2013. I'm like, or 2015. I'm like, oh, August. can't be the same problem. And then I finally find somebody who had the same problem around December, and apparently it's this like small unlucky minority of people with Windows 10. Just that happened when they did a recent patch. So, and then I get sick, so I lose my voice, which is why we didn't record last week. I had zero voice. I could not speak. And it's just been a bad week.
You just got shat on, man.
Oh, yeah, and then my car exploded. Like, my brakes were like, grind. I'm like, that's not a good sound. I'm not a mechanic, but grind is not a sound you want when you use your brakes.
Yeah.
So I take it into the shop, and they're like, oh, yeah, your rotary girder. Literally, he said rotary girder, which is something that I, like, used to make up words when we wanted to sound like we knew what we were talking about. He's like, yeah, it looks like your rotary girder is ground down. It's the brakes have just ground through the rotary binary valve. And I'm like, are you making words up right now?
Yeah.
It's like the key of gem filamentoso is out of whack.
So, and you're like, I have no way to fact check you. Sure, okay.
And he's like, yeah, it's going to be about $500 to fix because you need new tires as well because of winter. And I'm like, oh, it's true. I do need new tires. So all the money that I was like, well, I could either fix my eyes or my computer went into my freaking car.
Oh, man.
So it's been a pretty shitty week, all things considered.
That's great, man. That's great. I love it. I'm having a good time listening to your pain. That's good.
Yeah, it's been super good. So for my gaming this week, it's been mostly mobile games on my phone because it's the only thing I can see anymore. Yeah. And my 3DS for the same reason. I can hold it like right up next to my face like an old lady trying to read a book.
Do you have a rocking chair? Can you sit in that?
I knit during the load screen.
Oh, that is going to be the senior centers of the future, man. Just like 3DSs, like, you know.
Just like right up next to their faces.
Yeah, because they're so feeble and old. That's going to be us.
Oh, and the best news is I've been trying to dodge Star Wars Force Awakens spoilers the whole time.
Yes.
And this might be a blessing in disguise because apparently Star Wars Battlefront, a game I've been feverishly playing because this week is a bonus experience weekend.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, well, I can't play it now because of my computer. So I was like, oh, no, I'm going to miss out on all that bonus XP. You know, I'm going to get my rank up. And then I just read an article. It's like, hey, by the way, if you don't want to be spoiled for the new movie that just came out today, please don't play Battlefront because there's spoilers all over it now.
What?
So apparently, like, the new level that's based off of the movie is just like chock full of like things that happen in the movie.
What the fuck?
So that's my warning. If you guys haven't seen it yet, probably don't play Battlefront until you do.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah, I just watched it. No spoilers on this podcast, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I'm hearing good things, but you know, I can't see, so that'll be a fun experience when I finally make my way to the theater.
Oh, and it's rated PG-13, but that's fucking bullshit. I went there with my kids, and I was like, oh no, PG-13. I saw on the site, and there's some dicey PG-13 movies. I think like Jurassic World was PG-13 or something. It's like horrifying. But this one, it's PG-13. There's no reason. There's like no reason. I don't even think there's cuss words. So,
yeah.
You know, there's lightsaber battles and that kind of thing. So, you know, you see that, obviously.
It's a marketing thing. Like, people go to PG-13 more than PG movies.
Yeah. But anyway, so, but this week is not about Star Wars as much as I want everyone to watch it and let us know what you think.
Yeah, go see it. But don't describe it to me because in January when my eye insurance renews, I will get my eyes fixed.
It's so bad.
Yeah, it's been a pretty terrible week.
Well, speaking of awesome weeks, hey, we had someone write in about, okay, so there's this guy online. You've heard of Extra Credits?
Oh, yeah, I've heard about Extra Credits. I can't do the voice, but it's pretty sweet.
My name's Extra Credit. Yeah, he like intentionally changes his voice to be more weird or more annoying.
Cartoony.
Maybe, so I have a problem with this guy only because, and hey, he puts out a lot of good stuff. Like maybe 85% of the stuff he puts out, I'm like, oh, nice, good. But it's sort of like whenever you're at Christmas dinner and you know your parents are like I have some in-laws who are very traditionally minded, and they'll say all these wonderful things. They'll be like, oh man, everybody's so great and so wonderful and everything's great and anyone who doesn't believe like us is going straight to hell. And I was like, oh, that last part.
Oh, if you could just drop that last bit.
Yeah, that was really sweet. I feel like I can't recommend this.
I was right on board up until that point.
Yeah. And I'm like, maybe just a little more tolerant. I don't know, maybe, just maybe. And or no, like, you know, and peace be upon everyone except for Muslims because they blew up the Twin Towers. And I'm like, it wasn't all Muslims, but I see what you're saying. Terrorists suck. Oh man. That last part, and that's like every one of those videos. That's not true. A large portion of those videos, because everybody tries to be an armchair psychologist. I get it. We try to understand people, but
we used to do that before you were in psychology.
Yeah, but didn't we like always? Well, I hope we always tried to couch it as speculation, right?
Yeah,
were
we didn't
like,
actually think we were doing science, but we would like to speculate for fun.
yeah. So, I have a hard time because I'm big on like disseminating science, getting like because whenever I was a young kid, I always wanted a good source of information that was unbiased, right? Someone that could tell me the cool shit. So you got like Neil deGrasse Tyson now. You've got like who else is disseminating good information? Well, a lot of people got PolitiFact to help you figure out, when your candidate's acting like an idiot.
Bill Nye, the guy who does science.
Yeah, Bill Nye, science guy. I always love those guys because you're like, oh, finally, someone who's I can trust. So what I don't like is pseudo-intellectuals, or not, they're intellectuals, but like pseudo-experts where they speak like it's fact, but they don't actually know. They just Googled it. They're like, we did some research. And I'm like, you didn't do research. You literally Googled it.
Yeah, you did the research that we do for our news and reviews section, where it's like, oh, there's an article out right now that says there's a game coming out.
Yeah. Research, such a nebulous term.
It's like the layman's version of research. It's not like you're reading JSTOR articles about it.
Yeah, right. But this guy, he put out a really good episode that somebody just posted on our page. It was Mason. And it's called Sesame Credit: The True Danger of Gamification. And I thought this was a fascinating episode. Did you watch it?
Yes. I'm fascinated by dystopian literature, so it was fun trying to like see China like put its hat in the ring and be like, hey, you know what? Dystopian civilizations are pretty awesome. Nobody ever said except for China, apparently. Let's try it out.
Well, so to introduce this topic, if for people who haven't seen it, which it looks like not a whole lot of people have seen it so far. I think it has 32 views on our page at least. We've got hundreds of people. So I'll just introduce it. Basically, it's about using behavioral psychology, but finally someone taking it seriously. So like people have this idea. This is what annoyed me about extra credits, where he got a little off his kilter here. He started talking about game design and psychology. Awesome. Love that shit. Love it. But what he did was he put out an episode just not too long before this that says like going beyond Skinner boxes. Let me find the exact name of it so I don't misrepresent this. And it intrigued me because I was like, what do you mean going beyond Skinner boxes? Skinner boxes is life, right? Like being a behavior psychologist. I'm like, that's can you go beyond Skinner boxes? Where is it?
Skinner cubes, Skinner super boxes.
Right? Yeah. The future. He's got quite a few on here. You know what? I can't find it, but I'll just say it says something about going beyond there. And that intrigued me because I thought like, well, I mean, you could design a whole game around exactly that. And so he wrote in there these different ideas. He's like, what about fulfillment? What about storyline? All this, and I was like, that's still behavioral. What? So like he kind of got off and he kind of shat on Skinner boxes, which is a common thing in design. I've noticed game designers will be like, even our buddy, a friend of the show who was on a while back, Eric Zimmerman, was kind of like, yeah, but that's not all there is to gaming. And I'm like, no, it kind of is though. I mean, so behaviorism is they call it deceptively complex.
Right.
On its surface, it sounds simple. You literally this is how I describe it whenever I'm teaching it. I say, all right, watch this. S, I put a little S there for stimulus. I put an R, and then I put at the beginning, I put an A for an antecedent. And I say, all right, so here's what we got. ASR. I can explain everything about human nature through these three letters. Does that seem too simplistic? And, everyone's like, yeah, of course. And I'm like, yeah, it seems crazy, right? And on the surface, it's very easy to get. Like I start saying, okay, so tell me about this. Let's say you give a dog, you ring a bell, and then you introduce some food to a dog, right? Everybody's heard of this, and they're like, yeah, Pavlov's dog. I'm like, cool. So that's pretty easy to understand. We introduced this stimulus, right? He had a response, and that was reinforced, right? And not reinforced. It's not consequential. These are paired over time. And there you go. You can explain that behavior. And people can understand that pretty well. But they have a hard time understanding other things like how to get a kid to sit still inside of his chair using behaviorism. They're like, well, I can't really give him a positive consequence for just, not acting up. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good, from that point of view, you're right. You can't. But once you study it, like the longer I studied, I got so many questions wrong on my first few, because what our professor did, he would have us take a test at the beginning and take a test at the end because of the fact that people were like, oh, I don't feel like I learned anything. And he's like, what? Yes, you did. You learned so much. And we're like, well, it all seems so simple. And it's like, yeah, once you have the tools, it seems very
hindsight bias. Nice. So you just already knew it all before.
Yeah. And it seems so obvious when you're done. You're just like, I can't understand not seeing the world this way. So we took the test in the beginning and I got 1 right out of like 40 something. One right. And then when I finished, because they were the really complex ones, like leaving. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But at the end, I got all of them right, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, this really is a skill set." But once you have it, it's hard to unsee it. So to me, it seemed very simple. I was like, "No, this is clearly still behaviorism." But then I was like, "Well, is this guy an idiot?" And then I was like, "Oh no, I remember this. You can be smart and just not understand the principles yet."
Well, it's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Like it sounds right, and then you're like, "Wait, no, it's not so right."
Yeah. And so I understand it, but all I'm saying here is that, I didn't particularly like that video, but someone finally takes this stuff seriously and says, hey, let's pretend that you guys actually know what you're talking about. Let's pretend that, 70 years of research and very strong effect sizes, maybe we should take those seriously. And then they put it into play in society, right? That's what the China is doing.
Should we explain what the Sesame game is?
Yeah, it's Meow Meow Beans, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's Meow Meow Beans. My Meow Meow Beans. So for those who don't watch Community, start watching it. That was a reference.
Yeah. Okay, so what this is it's the Chinese government is playing with something right now. Not playing, I guess that's anyway. They're working on something that they're going to implement, and it's going to be mandatory for their citizens in 2020.
Right. Right now, it's opt-in.
Right, it's opt-in right now, and so what it is you get scores. So it taps into your bank account, it taps into your friends, your interactions with your friends, and it taps into, I believe, your location. Was that right?
Yeah, and it taps into what you purchase because they have the Chinese version of Amazon's linked into it. So if you buy like worker boots, it'll track that. If you buy like Japanese imported anime, it'll track that and give you a negative number.
Yeah, and it incentivizes you to do things that the government wants you to do. Now, this sounds fairly benevolent. You're like, oh, well, okay. So, if I go online and I purchase my tags through the online DMV store rather than going in and cluttering up that system, you get a couple of these points, right? And you're like, oh, yeah, possibly, who cares? Well, it actually has real world power, right? For any token economy to work, you have to be able to do something with those tokens, right? Like if you give a kid golden stars, after a while he doesn't care about the golden stars anymore. So like when we go into classes and the teachers start complaining about that, I'm like, well, what does that even mean? And they're like, well, he's a different color. And I'm like, but what does that color buy him? What does that do for him?
Right. It's why Chuck E. Cheese, like for 400,000 tickets, you can buy a big stuffed animal.
Yeah, right. And that's the cool thing about token economies is that you can actually stretch out their value to a point because just the act of getting any reinforcer, even though it's just a placeholder, any reward like that is reinforcing in and of itself. So you kind of get a double dip there. So what they did here was that same sort of thing. If you buy like worker boots or you buy literature or like Chinese made products, you get
or you post on your social networking, like you tweet about how the Chinese economy is doing super well. Look at these inflated stock market values.
Yeah, anything that the government wants you to do, you get this score. So what do you do with the score? Well, you use the score to the higher your score is, you can get benefits. So like one of them would be like you get faster turnaround times whenever you try to apply for a passport or a visa or something like that. You can also get I think there was just basically you get a lot of little hand ups, right? And they're still working on a lot of the rewards. But now here's the crazy part is that you are also judged by your friends.
Yes.
So let's say Tim, our kind of cynical asshole friend. I'm kidding. I love the guy to death. He's hilarious. But he's
also pretty cynical.
Yeah. But he's like a hilarious cynical where he says something awful and you laugh and you're like, oh my God, he's right.
Right. Like he's a veteran, right? So that would give him some points on paper. He served in the military. Mm-hmm. But every time he posts about the military, it's like, hey, you guys need to stop being sheep and stop voting, just blindly. Like it's always like counter culture stuff. Mm-hmm. And so even though he'd get bonus points for that, he would lose points because he's like, the government's corrupt, the system's broken, Republicans, blah, blah, whatever. Like he'll criticize whoever's in charge.
Yeah.
So that would lose him major points, which would lower his score. So let's say instead of having 300 points, now he's got 200, and that's a low score.
Right. So let's say you say fuck it, right? And you say, I'm just gonna fuck this system. I don't care. I'll take a little extra time to get my passport. I'll deal with all the negative effects of me not giving a crap. Well, here's the crazy part, and this is something I brought up on the episode where we talked about that gaming the classroom. Remember we were talking about that? What was it called? Epic or
Classcraft
or Class Quest or something? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking about that. I said, how would you get, like, you're going to have people who start to not perform as well as others, and then you have a problem with attrition, people attriting out, which is actually a verb. I didn't know that until I read it. Attriting out.
You're attriting me. That's a verb?
You're a tritter. Yeah. Yeah. But someone drops out, right? Because they're just like, man, like, you get these superstars in your class. Let's say me and David are in some race, and all of a sudden he just goes crazy and he starts winning like crazy. There's a part of us of me just wants to quit. I'm like, fuck this stupid game. I don't want to play anymore, right? Like every game of Monopoly. Well, how do you keep those people in? And one of the best ways is to get other people to incentivize that person for them. Because if you can get people within the system to promote the system and to get that person back up, that's way better than you as the administrator.
Turns out we're social creatures and we're highly susceptible to our peers more than like an authority figure.
Yes, because how many times you've had a boss riding your ass about something that you were supposed to get done, you just start not liking the boss. It's like whenever I talk about parenting and how you want to always catch them doing good, you want to be a secondary reinforcer just by coming in, right? They see you and they're like, yay. So that's what the government is looking to do.
I just read a novel, a Russian novel about a guy in a gulag, and he was talking about like in the Russian gulags in like the 50s, where the overseer is like, get to work, and you're like, fuck you, buddy, I hate you. But if your squad leader tells you to get to work, you're like, man, I'd go through fire for that guy. He's my squad leader, and everyone's like encouraging each other. So like they would have like a peer reinforcement system where they'd encourage each other to work harder, and then the authorities would kind of be hands off about it, and they worked like way harder than if it was just like a top down method. Yes,
whenever I was, I had a fire team. Whenever I led them, I would have done this totally differently if I would have known the psychology now. Because I used to say stuff like, "Come on, guys, do what you're supposed to do. I don't want to get on your ass," And whenever they do dumb stuff or show up late or show up without something, which always happens. But one of the ways now is to cause these economies to kind of perpetuate themselves. So that's what they're doing here. So let's say you get a friend that's really low. Well, it brings down your score.
So not only does Tim have like slower internet because he's being penalized, but now our score is dropping just for being friends with him.
Yeah, so let's say Tim's score's kind of low. Me and David are just overachieving. We're suckers, man. We're mice in this maze.
We love the party.
Yeah, we're just like, communism.
Big Brother is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. We're tweeting all the time about it. But then, oh crap, what if? No, David, your brother Joseph, he's in my circle and he's in your circle. He's really close in your circle. He's starting to kind of be like, fuck the government too. Well, shit, that also affects it. So the more friends you have that are lower score, the more it pulls on your score. And so how do you react, right? As a rat here?
Yeah, like I want my low scores high, because the other thing is when I log in, it gives you a map of your social network and it shows you what's bringing your score down. So I'm like, oh, my score drops, and there's like a red line connecting me to my brother, and I'm like, Joseph, dude, you got to pull the line. You're bringing my score down. So I'm gonna message him and be like, Joseph, you gotta like love Big Brother. Big Brother's the best. You're dropping my score, bro.
And there's a bunch going on here, but first of all, like you've got kind of two. You've got this is kind of false dichotomy, but intuitively you've got two options there. Mm-hmm. One, you could do exactly like you said, message him, try to get him to be a pro party, member. Or two, let's say after a while that just doesn't work, right? He's not a sheep. He's not taking it. He's like, no, David, you're being an idiot. I'm not going to post or tweet how rich we are when we don't have any money. Eventually, you might just cut him out of your circle.
Unfriend him. Yep. Yeah.
And then what does that do? Isolate. Yeah, and we do this in chick models, right? We take chicks and we isolate them, or rats, and we isolate them by themselves.
Yeah. You're not talking about the pickup artist. You're talking about baby birds.
Yeah. And here's what's funny is that there's a different reaction when you isolate a chick by themselves behind an opaque wall and behind a transparent wall. When you can see them, but you can't be with them, it's worse on you. And so that's exactly what they're doing. You can see your friends. You just can't be friends with them. You can't hang out with them. You can't go do things with them. But you can still see them. They're still approximate to you, right? In propinquity, as they say, which means like living close or being close to someone. But you can't interact with them. So it's even worse. So it's insidious there because you're actually causing that. That's a animal model for depression, right? We cause depression.
It's Darth Sidious.
Yeah. So all of this sounds pretty pretty rough, right?
I'm scared.
Yeah. So what do I have to say about this? A couple things. First of all, you probably have this happen a lot. You work with young, impressionable minds, right? And probably these kids are figuring out the world every day, right?
Yeah.
And they're coming up with these quote unquote totally rad new ideas. Probably.
Sure, yeah. It's we used to call it freshman philosophy 101 syndrome, where it's like, dude, have you ever thought about maybe the whole world's a simulation? Like they're the first person to come up with that idea.
Yeah. So this has been talked about at length, right? And one of which was the father of behaviorism, which was Frederick Skinner, B.F. Skinner, who very uncleverly wrote a novel about this. It's a fictional novel about a clever old professor named Professor Burrus. No relation, That's the protagonist in this this book. Obviously, this is him, and but he's like, no, that's not me. That's the worst part is he denies it when people ask him, like, no, that's not me. But he's a professor of psychology, and his name is Burrus.
It's like reading fan fiction where like a character with the same name as the author shows up, and it's like, I'm your long lost brother, and I'm super badass, and I'm a half Saiyan. They're like, oh, awesome.
And they're like, yeah, but the person's clearly modeled after you. It's like I want to say Sanctity. That's completely not right. The New Moon series. What was that? Twilight. Yeah, she wrote that girl basically as herself, and then when she was asked, people were like, no, that's not me. And then even her family members were like, yeah, that was her. She was really weird in high school, and she always wished that someone would come along. And she always talks about Adonises, but it's clearly you. That's a fanfic you wrote there. Nice try. Is that this guy wrote that, and what he wrote was this society, this utopian society that had been made based purely upon behavioral psychology. Like they're setting up a community that's driven purely by behavioral psychology. It's called Walden 2, off of Thoreau's Walden, which you're familiar with. What's Walden about?
It's basically escaping from society, going off and becoming a conscientious objector to the corruption of social life.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what he's doing here. He's talking about this escape from modern society and creating your own utopia, your own positive experience. So that's what he was talking about here, is this new community that had been set up. Now, he wrote this. He also followed it up with one called Beyond Freedom and Dignity, because he doesn't like both of those terms. You'll notice that I also do not like those terms whenever I talk about it. I'm like, there's no good and bad. There's no dignity, and there's certainly no freedom.
Yes, it's quite. It's a delightful experience having a conversation with you.
Yeah. Well, here's what's hilarious: is that book got banned by the Catholic. It's on the Catholic ban list. You're not supposed to read it if you're a good Catholic.
That's weird. They're usually really open-minded about books.
I know, isn't that weird? Yeah, they do not like this book because it definitely shits all over the idea of morality, in the sense of like, you do this because you're a good person, and that's actually like some kind of tangible quality or something. It's weird.
Like a D&D alignment, like you can cast detect good and some people will glow white.
Right, yeah. It's just a weird idea. Like that morality is some driving force rather than some descriptive force. Like whenever I give morality to my children, I do it this way. I say, you say whatever it is. It's called labeled praise. And if you want to Google this or look up on how effective this is for research, labeled praise, where you pointed out what they did. You have to name it like, oh, you picked up your clothes. Oh, that's great. Good job. Fantastic. Do whatever you need to do to reinforce that, right? Whatever works. But the part of it that is important is labeling it, and then if you want to, you can put a term on it, hypothetical construct variable, HCV, where you say, you're a good boy, or oh, that's good, or oh, well done. Like, what does well done even mean, right? Unless it's a stake, we don't know. There's no way to measure that.
You're a loyal party member. Well played, sir.
Yeah, that makes you a loyal party member. Yeah, what does that term mean? It's nothing. It's vacuous sounds until we assign some meaning to it, and the meaning is, whatever it is. Like, how do you figure that out as a kid? They're just like, oh, I don't know what good boy is, but I do know that whenever I picked up my clothes, I was called good boy, and it was associated, just like ringing the bell of Pavlov's dog, with this positive experience. Okay. And then I say, oh, you're such a good boy. Let's go out for ice cream. And then I bring in ice cream, and while I'm there, I say, good boys get ice cream, bad boys don't. Over time, you start understanding that there's this sequelae of behavior that you can do that will put you in contact with this term good boy. And whenever you're put in contact with this term good boy, now you've got a discriminative stimulus. You've got, not too many terms. You've got a new scenario that allows you to be in this kind of privileged society with your parents, right? Whenever my kids are being bad boys, they're in a bad society with me like that. I'm not going to go get them extra things if they ask for juice.
Bad boys don't get ice cream.
Yeah, exactly. Like if they ask me to like do them a favor, like, oh, can you grab this thing? I'm like, well, that I would love to, but remember you did that thing earlier, and that was really disrespectful. So I really don't want to do that for you now. I want to see you happy, but gosh, I just can't do that when you're acting that way, that kind of thing. So that you start to assign this understanding to the word good boy or just like good citizen. That over time it just. And here's the insidious thing about this that he didn't touch on in this video, is that. I've talked about BIM self-perception theory here a few times, right? Like, what was that about? Do you remember?
So it's like we tend to want to behave in the way that we perceive ourselves. So if you're like, I want to be a good father, and so because you want to be a good father, you're going to act that way because you perceive yourself as a good father. But if you tell someone they're like a piece of shit, they start acting that way because they perceive themselves as a piece of shit.
Oh yeah, okay, so that could play into it. That's more of labeling, like label theory, like. Whenever you label someone as good or bad or criminal, they found that just not calling criminals inside of a prison had I forgot the percentage. It's something like around 30% better or less infractions.
What's fun about your questions is I'm as an educator, like I'm very skilled at like making wrong answers sound right. So I don't discourage the person. I'm like, oh shit, I got the answer wrong. He's trying to spare my feelings. So what is self-perception theory?
We can't bullshit each other. Self-perception theory. Okay, so all that is this. So people had this idea that cognitions work towards behaviors, right? Like, you have this attitude or belief, and then you act on it, right? It informs your action. So, for example, let's say I'm a hard worker, and I'm presented with an opportunity to work hard. Someone says, "Hey, this weekend I'd like someone to help me move." They thought that. The original theories thought that we actually mold this over. We thought like, oh man, okay. So someone says, hey, will you help me move? And in that instant, we actually have this sub-vocalization or a talk to ourselves in our brains, right? And we say, gosh, I want to help that guy. And well, I am a hard worker, so yes, I'll help. And then we say, sure, I'll help. But what we found is through this has way more empirical evidence, is that we actually don't do that. We just say yes or no, depending on if we kind of feel like it. And a lot of things play into that. We can manipulate that by like working the person beforehand so that they're tired. We can do sleep. We can manipulate their sleep. We can give them a mood altering drug like caffeine to make them happy. Lots of things will affect this decision. It's not about you being a hard worker, quote unquote. It's just, what state are you in at the time? And then here's what's hilarious. You say yes or no because of whatever state you're in or whatever learning history you have with this person. Like, let's say it's been a fun experience before moving with them, or it's been a horrible experience before moving with them, whatever the case, that informs your decision. You say that decision, yes or no, and then you go and describe why you did it. So then if I say
no, I'm just like, oh yeah, but I'm actually super busy that day because I have this and this and this, even though that wasn't in my mind when I said no.
Yeah, and if someone says, why did you do that? A psychologist asks you after they manipulated that, and you would say, well, because I value my time off, or whatever it is, you'd fish for a reason that sounds socially acceptable for why you did that. Or if you decided to do it, you'd be like, oh, well, I'm a hard worker. Or, oh, gosh, I'm a good friend. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It does not inform your decision.
It's that whole thing where we make decisions before we're conscious of making them. That's the scariest part of psychology for me.
I know.
It really undermines the idea of free will because you don't know why you're doing things. You just do them and then trick yourself into thinking you knew why you did it.
So that's the thing. Yeah. And we've done this through a lot of experiments, like where we have someone do something like arduous and just laborious, where we have them come to the laboratory. And one of them was just tie a shoestring around this pegboard basically over and over and over again for an hour. Can you imagine how horrible that would be for an hour? And then afterwards we'd say, hey, how was that? And they're like, oh, if we paid them, you've heard of this cognitive dissonance, right? And this has been done tons of times in different modalities. But, and then afterwards, if we pay them, they say, no, it wasn't so great. But if we didn't pay them, they said, oh yeah, that was worth it. Because
it had to be worth it or else you wasted your time.
Yeah, but if you pay them, then it's like, well, I didn't do it because it was worth it. I did it for the money.
Right.
It's for that reason. So imagine that. Take that principle and apply it to this situation. So you have these people behaving in a certain way over and over and over again. For they understand initially that they're just gaming the system, but over time, how do you think that's probably going to affect them?
Well, they'll be more invested in the system that they've been gaming because they've been doing it for so long.
Yeah, imagine a year of doing this, right? No one wants to face it's very counterintuitive to come to the conclusion that they're a fraud. They're acting like a fraud for a year or
years. They're being manipulated.
Yeah, but so over time, they're more likely to, or this is a prediction that you'd make based on empirical evidence, is that they would start to be more favorable towards whatever it is they're behaving toward.
Which
and we
is
see
what
this
is really insidious about the opt-in method, because right now they're going to have 5 years of people who've been doing this voluntarily. They're going to be more invested when it becomes obligatory.
Yeah, I like to call this the League of Legends effect, where you play a horrible game so long and you get good at it that you start saying, no, it's a worthwhile skill set and it's a good game. And you're like, no.
And you're like, well, what? That last hit mechanic's nonsense. It's just a stupid mechanic left over from the way Warcraft 3 was coded. Like, there's no reason to have that in the game, but you're really good at it now, so now you enjoy that skill.
Exactly. It's just like me with StarCraft. Like, managing my economy for the first 5 minutes of a game is so, I've practiced it so much. I practiced it for years, if not a full year, and I practiced it so much that now I value that. And when they took away that in Legacy of the Void, they cut out a lot of that. They just instantly start with 12 workers, and I was just like, I felt affronted. I was like, no, you can't do that.
Because when you look at it objectively, it's something that doesn't add anything to the game, right? Because everybody has to do the same thing. There's no meaningful choices involved. It's just, how do I get my drones out the fastest?
Right.
There's only one way to do it. So it just becomes a monotonous skill that you have to do, but it doesn't really add anything to the gameplay. It just makes it makes the first 5 minutes of the game kind of boring because nothing's happening except you're managing your drones.
Right.
But
and
because you spent so much time getting good at it, that you ended up getting upset when they took it away to make the game overall better.
Yep, I know, and I know I'm a victim of it even as I do it. So, like I said, League of Legends effect. That last hitting thing is fucking garbage. It's a horrible mechanic, but it does, because you got so good at it, and it's become competitive versus your other laner. You're like, oh, this is kind of a fun little thing, but it's not. Objectively, from the front up, it's not fun. You can make anything fun over time. Like cleaning a weapon for me is fun. Is it fun the first time I did it? Fuck no. And is it fun objectively, if there is such a thing, or at least to people who come in and try it? No. So anything can be fun, and so the only way to look at it is it fun objectively, or to most people in the beginning situations? No, it's not something attractive and that you're going to have a good feeling about. So with this, that's what's so insidious about this, is that you're going to have these people slowly being mind washed. Now, here's the crazy thing. The reason why I think this is interesting is because it's the first time someone actually took behavioral psychology seriously and started to understand that you can actually affect all of life, right? Without this strange notion that we have of good, bad, patriot, or whatever, and just going straight to what works. This is what they're finally doing. This is a communist nation that has no real ideals of good and bad and morality. I mean, they do. That's simplistic, but I mean, philosophically,
they don't have the same Western ideals of good and evil that we do.
Yeah. So they've divorced themselves from that. And they went
plus, interestingly enough, it's a country that's been just immersed in MOBAs, or not MOBAs, but MMOs, right? World of Warcraft, like Chinese gold farmers. Like their citizens have been a slave to Blizzard's behaviorism for so long. It's like they just were like, hey, we could use that too.
Yeah, and they're finally getting people who know something about psychology to do this. And yes, is it terrifying? Of course. Here's the thing that's crazy is that Amy just asked me the other day. She said, "Did you say that? Did you just say that off the cuff, or did you think about that beforehand?" And I was like, "I'm about to say something I don't want to say. I think about everything about how it benefits me before I say it. Literally everything. I don't think I make hardly any decision without that, because that's part of psychology of being a therapist, well, at least an evidence-based therapist, is you do something called functional analysis, which is what is it?
Will this have? Will it help me?
Yeah, what do I want from that person? What do I want the client to understand? Like, I'd say all these flowery, dumbass words I would never say to you. If you came to me and said, Jeremiah, I'm feeling depressed today, I wouldn't be like, oh, okay, so think about yourself and come up with a metaphor, because that's not how you and I connect, right? But with an average person in the therapy room, I think I come off as probably an idiot. Like, I'll say things about mindfulness, and I'll just I won't talk about the research of it. I'll just say these are these moments of tranquility that you can get in the middle of the storm. These are the moments that make life worth living. This is the peace you can have.
You're so wise. Tell me more.
Yeah, and it's just I sound like a soothsayer, but I'm only doing that because if I just we know from research that if I just use scientific language, people don't seem to get better. They don't know how to they don't trust me. They don't believe it's true whenever I say something. But if I can use metaphors, for some reason, as soon as you switch to metaphorical language, people fucking love that shit. They eat it up.
We connect with story. It's natural to want a metaphor over hard facts.
Yeah, so imagine that being banged in you for like 8 hours a day for the last 5 years of my life. Like, I can't help but not think that way now. So whenever I want something from the client, I look at them and I say, all right, I want them here, or I want them to understand this principle. In what language and what body, movements do I need to do to get them there? And so it becomes very disingenuous, but it's for the greater good. Now, the crazy thing is, what if you use that skill set to be a fucking dick? Like, it's China, right?
Yeah.
Like, or what they're doing. It's all about intention. Once you've got that skill set, it's terrifying what you could do with people. Anyway, it sounds a little self-filleting. I'm not filleting myself. I just mean that once you have that skill set, anyone that studied it long enough can do this, or does this probably by default.
Right. You could. It happens everywhere, right? Like, you could know on some level that if you're a dick to a girl, she's probably going to be like, oh, I'm kind of intrigued. Sometimes that's like the pickup artist bullshit.
Yeah.
But it doesn't justify being a dick to her just because you think it'll get what you want. Like, that's where the intention comes in.
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah. And like, this happened literally yesterday. My kids were doing something and I raised my voice at them and I said, what did I tell you to do? And then he said this, and I go, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I'm doing this. And I said, get in there and get your shit on. And they're like, okay. And he was like, hey, that is not okay. You can't cuss our kids and you shouldn't be raising your voice. And I was like, oh, I understand why you're concerned. No, I was only doing that to up the magnitude. I'm not upset at all. Look at me. Like, I'm fine. I was just doing that because I knew that the last time I asked him in a calm voice. And so I had to add a punisher to this, and to punish it, I use this. But sometimes I raised my voice before to punish the child. But this time I used a cuss word to show that that's a discriminative stimulus, to show that, like, we are now in the situation where you could be in very serious trouble if you don't do this. And I was like, I'm not mad. I wasn't. I get mad. I'm not saying I'm a fucking robot, but I often use it's
deliberately chosen.
Yeah, the appearance of anger and anger are two different things. Like, it'd be like if someone, yelled something obscene at my wife. I wouldn't get angry. Probably, I would just act angry. I would say, "Hey, back the fuck off," because you want them to understand.
You do sound a little bit like a sociopath right now. Just FYI.
I know. Isn't that the line? Like, it's intention, right? Like,
right.
So you just have to trust that I have the greater good in mind, I guess.
Yeah, I trust you. I'm just saying, if I didn't know you, I'd be like, oh, this is Dexter Morgan. He's going to take me to a table and cut me open later.
Okay, well, I guess I'm not trying to pass that idea off. I'm just saying that emotions are either useful or not. And if you have this ability that I encourage everyone to get, or that I try to put into people with mindfulness and things, is that you notice the emotion before you succumb to it, and then you decide whether it's useful or not, and then
the functional analysis step of what is this serving, what purpose is this?
Yeah, it's that little step in between that can really just change people's lives. And so, maybe for the worse if I'm a robot, but it really gives me a lot of help, in dealing with things. But here they're using that, they're taking psychology just seriously. So I sort of, in a dark kind of way, kind of love that this is happening. But I wish I'm just happy that someone is finally like, oh wait, we can actually do this in real life.
Well, yeah, like, you're validated because your profession is now being proven to be useful. But it's like Oppenheimer. He's like, man, my atomic theory sure is useful as, like, nuclear bombs are being created.
Yeah. Oh, it'd be like if you were a math teacher. Like, let's say you're getting your PhD in math or something, and someone was like, everybody thinks math is for parlor tricks, but really you can describe all of reality through math. We just don't understand how. So, like that. There's a show called what is it called? Numbers, I think. Have you heard about this?
Oh yeah, it's one of those like detective dramas, but they use numbers to solve things.
Yeah, and essentially a lot of it is just data analysis. And when I first watched it, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh. I saw this whenever I was before grad school. But then we're forced to go through these just horrible stats classes. And once I had to learn that stuff, afterwards I was like, oh, that's easy shit. All he's doing is pattern analysis. Or here he was doing, he was looking for, one of them is, oh my gosh, I keep thinking functional analysis. No. Discriminative analysis. And so, okay, so he's just trying to find out these two separate paths. So, okay, this is easy stuff. But at the time, it blew my mind. And I think that's probably what it's like to mathematicians, is we're like, oh, we can use this to make to figure out how big my fence should be. Oh, math is a cool little parlor trick. But they're like, no, if you took this seriously, you could figure out anything you want, Right. And so there's this moment where people are like, oh, math is cool, psychology is cool. Okay, we're done with that. Now let's continue designing the game. And I'm like, no, you could have kept going there's that moment of like letdown. So it's almost a little perversely exciting that someone is actually being like, oh, there is no ceiling. I'm like, of course there's not. You could control all of society with this.
Yeah, everything is behaviorism.
Exactly, yeah. On the other hand, yes, this is totally sick, and I hope it goes away.
But it probably won't, because it's going to work.
I know.
If we take the behaviorism model and we apply it to politics, there's no disincentive for them to not do this once they see that it works, and they will see that it works because it works.
Oh, it's going to work. The only ways this could not work, I mean, you're going to have a systemic upheaval, right? It's like if all the kids all at once decided that they didn't give a shit about my jelly bean system or something, if I was doing that, if all of them could do that all at once, then yeah. But even if there's just a few left, then you've got a problem. There's actually a big paper that talks about religion this way, and however you feel about that, it's an interesting read, talking about these self-sustaining and self-perpetuating ideals that have to do with professing how true they are within the system to other people. And it's professing how true they are. It doesn't convert anyone. We found that professing about any system doesn't convert people. All it does is bolster the forces. So
right.
all when people say they're sharing their testimony with people, I'm like, oh, that's actually not changing people's mind, whether you're religious or not. Like we've got lots of psychologists who are very religious, but they understand that proselytizing and saying, I believe this is true, has no effect on the person. It only affects the people that are in the system and makes them more sure that they're right, which is kind of terrifying.
They've admitted that the Mormon church, I was a missionary, right? And they have us knock on doors. We know that doesn't work. We've done it hundreds of hours, and nobody gives a shit what you have to say about your religion. And the church is upfront about this. They say the purpose of the mission is to convert the missionary.
Ugh.
They don't even bother hiding it. Like, it's just to make you more solid in your faith.
And it works, and that's
again,
part of
sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah, self-perception theory, right? Like I didn't waste 2 years of my life. Like every time you say something is true over and over, it actually makes you feel more true. And there's a name for this heuristic. I rarely use it. I can't remember it at the time. There's something like 60-something heuristics, so I'm having a hard time remembering this one. But it's every time something is brought up, even if it's questioned, like, hey, I'm not saying this is good or bad, but steaks are the greatest food on earth. And then you say, I don't know if I agree with this statement, but steaks are the greatest food. Like no matter how you couch it, the more you bring it up, the more sure we are later in life. If somebody asks you, how sure are you this is true? It goes up.
I'm pretty sure. I've heard someone say it before.
Yeah, and that I suspect, and I don't know if this is true, but I suspect it's even has a stronger effect if you're the one saying it over and over.
And bringing it back to China, I would predict just because of there are cultural factors too at play. And the Chinese and Asian culture in general is more focused on the group dynamic than the individual. Like America's way on the individualistic side. China's on the other side of the spectrum where it's like everything I want to do is for the group. It's just part of the Confucian kind of philosophy that they're raised in. So I would predict that this is actually more effective on them because they're already kind of conditioned to think of themselves as a unit and part of the greater whole instead of an individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. It's important to think about context, but overall, this is scary, fascinating, interesting. Do you think there's any chance this will come to America?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it would be effective in America, but again, I think that we're, as a culture, more inclined to push back against these things.
Yeah, why?
It has to do with the context, right? Like every year, just taking my high school, right? Every year we make them read 1984 and we talk about Big Brother. So we're already kind of primed to be on the lookout for things like that. Now, we might still fall into it, but I think there'd be more resistance.
Yeah, and I think we subscribe to this idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps or...
Yeah, our mythology is different. Like we believe in like the exceptional individual. That's why Trump has so many supporters, right? He looks like a success story. Some guy who just like powered through and became a success, even though he inherited his success.
Yeah, he like came from nothing. I got a simple $1 million loan from my father. I was like, okay, stop right there. Hang on. Like,
slow down there, cowboy. With $1 million loan, you can do a lot of successful things.
What's funny is this came up in the context of me. I said, I said, well, I'm just not all that impressed by Trump, and I was trying to be as kind as I could about it because I actually don't like him at all. But I was like, I'm just not that impressed by him. I wonder about how much of his wealth he inherited because, statistics show. And the guy's like, before I could finish, He goes, no. He came from nothing. He pulled himself up by his bootstraps. He built his entire empire by himself.
With nothing but grit, hard work, and $1 million loan. He was able to be a success.
Yeah, and I said, essentially, yeah, of course, there's always outliers in data, always. But, man, I don't know. That's weird because, I would predict that his parents would have given him some money to start with or something. That's typically how it starts, right? They fund their losses. They allow them a safety net to go try something crazy. That's weird. And he goes, well, he did get a little bit of money. And I was like, oh, well, let me just Google it because he didn't know how much. And I was like, oh, $1 million. And the return on investment is less than if he just put it in a savings loan and just allowed it to accrue wealth. This guy
he's actually a failure if you look at how much money he was given.
Yeah, if he was a hedge fund manager,
he could have just put it under his mattress and been fine.
Yeah. You could put it in literally anything and it would have adjusted faster than inflation, which it hasn't. So that's what's funny about that whole thing. But yeah, what was I saying? Oh, wow, how did that tie in?
American individualism, our myth of being able to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Yeah, we're slammed by this by every which way, even though all the data show that that's not true. You won't find a human data scientist who believes that myth. It doesn't happen. I won't find it. But,
right. When I bring up the differences between Asian and Western cultures, I don't want to make it sound like ours is better. I think that ours is equally, if not more so, bullshit than their myth. Their myth of being part of the greater whole is probably more factually accurate than ours of I'm a success story. I built this business up from scratch. Yeah, but you had roads and you had police and you had all these things that the community helped you with. So you're not really doing that by scratch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I always like the people who if a doctor comes out of a successful or a surgeon comes out of a successful surgery. And he walks out and he's like, whoa, I saved that dude's life. I don't like that as much as I like when they're like, whoa, me and my team of people saved. The nurses were handing them the equipment. They were providing suction, keeping things clean. That was really a team. And you did the kind of the critical work that is required for a large education. But it's not
plus God.
Well, yeah. Oh, and you're in a hospital. Could you have done that if you were in the Bermudas? No. I mean, you had all the equipment.
Right. Right. Your medical training, where did that come from? There was somebody that taught you. We're all interconnected. So in a way, I think that the Asian idea of we're all just organisms as part of a greater organism, I think that's probably more accurate in how our success comes about. Mm-hmm. But I'm not saying either one is better, assigning a value to it. But I do think our cowboy individualism myth is more mythological than the other way of thinking.
Yeah. And, this just in closing, one of my closing thoughts is this brings about that thing we talked about a while back where I said, if people start taking psychology seriously, I think we're going to be held liable for some of these things. What's funny right now is I have insurance for malpractice in psychology. I don't need it because no one ever files malpractice against us because I think fundamentally people don't really believe this works. And you know what I mean? If you believed that what your psychologist did to you caused you to get worse, then you would sue them, right?
Right, but that almost feels like believing in magic, right? This doctor said some words to me and now I'm worse. It's a spell he put on me. So people kind of push back against it. It's yeah, you can talk to me all you want. It's not going to change me. Those are just words.
Well, plus there's the insidious part where people, people, if you can get someone to say something is their idea, then they're more likely to do the homework it involved for them to practice the skill.
It's the inception principle, right? If you can make them think it was something they came up with, they're more invested in it.
Yeah, which is all of therapy. People, my supervisor said this, and it did not sit well with me at the time. Now I understand, but they said the best psychologists make the clients feel like they're worthless, or that the psychologists are worthless, not that the client's worthless. That would be horrible. Right. That's called depression. No, because then they're like, oh, I did that on my own. And I was like, that did not sit well with me. I was like, no, I wanted that surgeon feel. You walk out and you're like, yeah, I did it. And he was like, rock star. He was like, this isn't surgery, man. You're going to be the guy behind the scenes who makes the person come up with ideas because they're so smart. And I was like, I don't want to be that guy. And but
you want to be Emperor Palpatine? Just be pulling the puppet strings unseen behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's what's hilarious. And what's funny is that on some degree they know it. My hardest problem right now is getting rid of clients. I'll fix them. They're on all objective measures. I'm like, no, all these empirically validated measures show you're better. And they're like, no, I don't want to leave yet. I feel like there's more to work on. And I'm like, but you came up with all this on yourself. They're your own. They're like, yeah, I know, but I just want to keep coming. It's like that. They know that when they're coming to therapy, their life is going well and they feel good. And they're not sure why, but they feel like they're coming up with all the best ideas in the room. But it's I think that's part of what contributes to people not taking psychology seriously as well. But mostly because we have bad practitioners.
So I'm curious, when you brought this video up, you were very, you had a negative kind of reaction to it. Like you're like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. What specifically did he get wrong then? Because it sounds like we've just been talking about what he got right.
So I just have a sordid history with this guy, but the on this particular video, what was it? It was the takeaway. There was a takeaway at the very end, and I should have watched it again right before this episode.
Where he said, like, if you're in China, please tell me why I'm wrong, and if I'm not wrong, I hope that this video helps make this thing not actually come to pass.
Yeah, I don't really remember. Darn it. It had to do with the fact that he has a limited understanding of behavioral psychology. He feels like it's this. Everybody's Googled Skinner box, right? Everyone's taking Psych 101. They understand what it is to have a rat inside of a thing to push a lever. And so they start seeing things through that lens, but they don't know how to extrapolate that to more complicated situations. So he had some takeaway that gave me that taste in my mouth. And then I watched a couple of his other videos too, and I was like, oh, this guy, he's so close to being right so often, but he gets so many hits. I'm like, oh, that to me that feels like currency, right? That they're getting so many hits. Not that I want them many hits. It's just that whenever we look at, we call them nodes, and when we do social analyses, whenever we look at how an idea spreads in our lab, there's these nodes where they're connected to so many people, and they connect out to so many people. So when those nodes are wrong, it's such a bad effect. You see like this ripple, of bad ideas, and you're like, oh, stop, don't do that, don't have bad ideas. So
stop being influential in your wrongness.
Yeah, he gets a lot right, but it's sort of like the fruit of the poison tree, in law, where you get one little piece of evidence wrong, you got to throw away that whole source.
Poisons the well.
Yeah, I'm not saying don't watch this channel, though. Guy's smart, he's cool, great topics, and he does the best of what he's got.
There's no more condescending phrase than he does the best with what he has.
I know, it sounds horrible. It's like whenever I do parenting advice, especially to friends. Oh God, that's the worst. Whenever someone's like, "How do I get my kid to do this?" and I'm like, "Oh, that's you, man." Like if it's something that's like obviously their fault, I always tiptoe around it, and eventually I get there, and then they get it. They're like, "Oh, I think it's me." You help them understand that. And then once they get there, I'm always like, oh, you did the best of what you knew. Every parent is doing their best pretty much. And you just, you're working with the tools you got. You just had limited tools. And they're like, you're saying I'm dumb. I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. Feels that way.
One interesting tidbit I got from the video that I didn't know was the idea of like the alpha phase of World of Warcraft, where they penalized you for being unrested.
Oh, that was it.
Was that the thing that like bugged you?
Yeah, because that is all of behaviorism, right? Like people are like, well, how do you punish things? And I was like, well, if you're clever, you don't have to. And then they're like, well, what do you mean? And I go, punishing is a shortcut. If you
let's
if you
explain
don't have
the context of the rested, unrested thing so they can understand it. So it used to be when you were online, like World of Warcraft, I guess used to be more benevolent, and they were like, remember how Earthbound would like every few hours be like, hey, you've been playing this game a while, you want to take a break and go outside, buddy?
Yeah.
So World of Warcraft used to be that way, where they'd say, hey, man, your character's no longer rested. Your character's now unrested, so you get a penalty on your experience points. And then that was to encourage you to log off it and then go do something else, come back in the next day when you had more rested state. Mm-hmm. And so people hated that, right? They hated feeling like they were being penalized for playing the game too much. And so what Blizzard did, without changing any of the numbers, they just changed the labels. So now, unrested experience, instead of being a penalty, that was considered the normal. It was the same amount of experience, but now that's the normal state, is unrested. And when you're rested, you get bonus experience, which used to be the normal amount.
Yep.
And so without changing any of the values, they just changed what they labeled it, and people loved it. They're like, oh, I'm rested. I get bonus experience now.
Dude, and take that. Oh, this is what drives me crazy. Take that effect right there. And that's called cognitive restructuring, right? It's a big part. It's the big part of the cognitive bit of cognitive behavioral therapy. And people are like, oh, it's a parlor trick. I'm like, fuck no, it's not. Look at this effect just like that, right? Look at the magnitude and the duration of this effect is insane. Like if you can flip something to the positive, if you can practice that, well, here's what's crazy is that we don't understand we're doing it when we do it. We think we come up with an assessment of something and we think it's true. That's a true assessment.
Right.
True with a capital T. And psychologists, we don't believe in true with a capital T. There's no such thing. There's simply our perception. And 90% of our conclusions is based on just perception. People will be like, oh, that was a bad movie. And I'm like, and whenever I hear someone say that, I'm like, okay, so what are the contextual variables there and what led to that? Like, I didn't watch any of the trailers to like Star Wars, for example, and I loved it. The reason why I didn't watch any trailers, because when I watched trailers, I realized it colored the way that I come into the movie, right? If the trailer is this, you know, boom, boom, zap, zap fest, and then I go watch it and there's not as much action, I will come to the conclusion that the trailer was overhyped, and subsequently, I will call the movie not as good. And I won't realize I'm doing that. I believe that that's a true assessment of the movie, right? And so if you understand what goes into people's perceptions, you start to realize that people are dumb, including myself. Everyone's dumb, right? We're all dumb.
Right.
And so
right.
whenever yeah, you're right. It is no fun to talk to people like that. But
so we're all dumb puppets and we have no free will.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. No, but and then this guy talks about, you know, flipping. All they did was flip that, and he was like, "That's all they did." I'm like, "That's 100% of life, man." Like it's another deceptively complex thing. It sounds simple. You're like, "Oh, just spin the positive." That's not true. No, it's all about understanding what got us to a certain place, and then we have to understand it's not true. We have to do behavioral experimentation. It's like a whole thing in therapy I have to do with people who are depressed and anxious, or they can just go take a fucking pill. Oh, don't get me started.
Right. Go ahead.
I just had a client come in after I've been working for 4 weeks, 4 sessions, and on anxiety, and things were getting good. Measures were coming down. Her life was getting better. All of a sudden, she comes back in, and she's looking great. I was like, what's going on? Wow, that was a huge jump. We're not even through the first 2 modules of a 6-module system. How did your scores jump so far? She's like, oh, I went to a psychiatrist. I was like, I literally on the spot. I was like, we're done here. I'm not gonna mess around with that. Benzodiazepines are not something to fuck around with. First of all, because you can get hooked, and she's a former addict, right? So I was like, that's not something to mess around with. They are very bad, and physicians won't tell you that, and psychiatrists rarely even tell you that. And then second of all, you just undid all therapy because it's about testing yourself. And then what we have to do is slowly over time deride these cognitive underpinnings we have of these evaluations. Like the movie was bad, right? You don't understand what it is that caused you to think that. And even if you try to think about it, you're like, oh, I don't know, because I don't have enough understanding to understand why I came to that conclusion.
Right. And you just introduced a whole new variable where it's like, and the pills fixed me. And now we've just undermined the whole cognitive aspect of the therapy.
Yeah, because it's just like in panic. When somebody has panic disorder, like if they come in and they go and they get in these situations that are progressively more challenging, or let's take phobia. People understand that a little bit better. Let's say I get someone who's afraid of tight spaces to finally get to the place where they'll get into a elevator and ride it up 2 floors and get out. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a huge session. We're already starting to deride this, uncouple this stimulus with that response, that behavioral response of panic, right? Great. And then they take a pill while they're in there. Oh, that drives me crazy. I'm like, do you realize what you just did? You just made it worse because now you think that you have to have that pill in your pocket to exist, don't you? And they're like, yeah, I always have a pill.
Fucking magic feather. That's what you're doing.
And they're like, oh, yeah, how did you know I have a pill in my pocket? And I'm like, because I fucking know psychology. Oh, man. Sorry, I'm good. These are the things.
No, and this is like 90% of TED Talks, right? Like I'll be looking through TED Talks and it's like, did you know that economics can change the way you think? And they'll be like, there's a study, right, where they had this subscription to a magazine and it was like $99 and you got a free digital content with it. And there was one that was $99 without the free digital content. And people always went for the free digital content, even though when we offered the digital content for free without it, nobody clicked on it. It's crazy. We're controlled by variables. Everyone acts like they're the first person to discover that behaviorism works. It's like, I swear, 90% of TED Talks are about that.
I know. And even like
economist discovers secret to human behavior.
Yeah, that I'm telling you, man, I'm a cynical piece of shit now because of that. I'll watch those TED Talks and they drive me crazy. And these situations too. What's funny is being a therapist or being in psychology, you're working against the client because every human being wants what's easy, right? Obviously, we want. If I could take a pill to make myself feel better, I should do that, right? We constantly, every day, make decisions. Did you? The CDC just came out with the finding of a little over 80% of all the world things that kill people are behavioral problems. We kill ourselves. We make short-term decisions like fast food, and the long-term fucking ourselves, right? We do these things on a regular basis. Oh yeah, I'll smoke a cigarette now so that I don't have to, so that I can quit later, right? Or whatever. We make these decisions all the time. So I'm working against a client because there's these pills out there that can make you feel great, and they don't understand the long-term benefits of them, like impotence or whatever it is. Like let's say it's a tardive dyskinesia. Google that. There's these, and I'm like, no, and more importantly, you're not fixing yourself. I watch people. This is what it'd be like if I was a physician, watching people walk with a broken leg, and they're like, oh, I need some physical therapy. I'm like, cool. This is gonna suck. It's gonna be uncomfortable, but your leg's actually gonna be stronger when we get out of it. And they're like, okay. So I reconstruct their knee, and then I start having them walk over, and then a third of the way through, they're like, that's good. I'm not only gonna do this. I'm taking pain pills. I'm like, well, first of all, pain pills are addictive. Second of all, you're not fixing the problem. You're actually making it worse. So whenever you get off the pain pills, you're gonna have a resurgence of the symptoms, basically, but worse. And like I could fix you and make you better in everything. Why did you take the pills? I get it. Pharmaceuticals have their benefits in some situations. I worked in an inpatient facility. I understand. I regularly advocated pharmaceuticals in certain situations. But if you're a functioning adult, 95% of psychological problems, including simple things like being uncomfortable or miserable, can be fixed with psychology. Okay. I'm off my soapbox. I'm sorry, people.
Yeah, we were due for one.
Yeah. Anyway.
It was, anyway, fun video. Except for, it sounds like you had more of a problem with the tone than the content. Like the idea that like, I just discovered that behaviorism is actually a real thing and it can affect behavior.
Yeah, it's these, and I should be happy about them because I know this is how scientific ideas get spread through social circles, is by these popular people who aren't experts. That's, we know that that's true. Experts don't spread ideas. It's their advocates.
It's the Kardashians.
Yeah, or like the people who read expert stuff and don't know what they're talking about, but then they just say it. They do their best to reiterate that. So they're very important. But to me, I keep thinking, if you ask him any question about that or why it works, he won't understand. Like, that seems to me crazy. Like, there's a Q&A section after every time you give a talk at a research, anytime you're giving research, like at a conference. He couldn't do that section because he doesn't understand what it is or why it works. He's so... Right.
He's the prophet, but he's not the source. He's just the spokesman.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's, and so when people like get excited about it, I'm always like, it's actually very simple of why that works. And yes, of course that works. So anyway, right. Yeah, you're right. A lot of it's tone and implication.
Right. He's the me in our duo. Like I could tell you everything that you just told me to somebody, but if they question me on it, I'd be like, you'd have to ask Jeremiah. I'm not the expert.
Yeah, or me in literally every other field. I don't know what I'm talking about. I get excited about things, but I don't know what I'm talking about. Right. But the difference is I'll admit that, or I'll refer people to people who know. So it's more my frustration with how the system of how social ideas spread. It's what I'm studying right now, so it's sensitive subject.
Right. But anyway. It's an interesting video. If you just take it at the content and you don't really care about the social dissemination aspect of it, like most of us, I would definitely check it out. It's what's it called? Sesame
Credit. Meow Meow Beans.
Yeah, gamification. Oh, and is gamification going to be a word now? Because I really don't like that word.
See, that's part of it. It's not gamification. Literally just put psychology in the title and you're done. Just be like, the true danger of psychology.
Yeah.
It's the idea that psychology is parlor tricks is like 90% of my, I'm exaggerating, 70% of my problem. Whenever people come in, they're like, what exactly, because one of the questions I do after the intake is, what do you think therapy is going to be like? What does this look like to you, right? What are you expecting out of this? And a lot of times they're like, I guess I just talk about my problems or me as a childhood. I'm like, this isn't parlor tricks, bitch. This is how your brain works. We're literally recoding your brain. Ugh.
Yeah, but what am I thinking right now?
Okay, yeah, that's a parlor trick. Anyway, so yeah, it's that gamification.
Gamification of Sesame. It's a scary idea because he talks about how fear and like punishment are not as effective as social pressure, which is so true. And that's why I think this is going to work. I think China is going to become a perfect system of worker bees and drones because we're kind of wired for it to work that way. And it's just, they're actually taking it seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if someone was like, how would I breed fanaticism into my populace? I would give them a situation similar to this. Very similar, actually. So, yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah, but also, maybe it's just going to be a better country for it. Who knows? Maybe becoming drones will make everybody happier.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, sense of purpose is a big part of it. How we structure things in our brain of why we're doing things. I'm doing this to be a good dad. No, you're not. You're doing it because it makes you feel good to be with your kids. But saying it's a good because I'm a good dad is a useful illusion. I say it to myself. It's
Right.
not true. I don't do things to be a better dad. I do them because to be a better dad, quote unquote, is tied to a lot of feel goods. My wife thinks I'm a
Right.
better person. I just by saying that to myself feels good because of the context of other people saying that person's a good dad and
Yeah, yeah,
look
yeah.
at him.
Heaven,
Everything.
hell, free will. There's a lot of useful illusions that actually are not true but helpful.
I don't know. Free will, is it really useful? Like, think about that. People shit on people that are homeless, and I'm like, or not homeless. People know that that's taboo, but people who are poor, they're like, go get a job, and I'm like, as
Yeah, but
if.
don't you need to have the idea that free will exists for a lot of these behavioral things to work?
Well, no. I mean, I do them on myself. Like, I've exercised 5 days, the last 5 days, because I was like, I'm gonna do a 5-day thing. I'm gonna use my
Yeah.
psychology.
Yeah, but I don't know if you're like in the middle of the bell curve for like how most people's brains are.
Well, I don't know. I feel like if everyone learned this stuff, that they do the same things. Hopefully, I don't know. Maybe not. This
Well,
is
for example, what I'm thinking about is prison, right? Like prison is a behavioral stimulus. Like you don't want to go to prison, that's going to affect your behavior. But if you feel like there's no free will, then there's an ethical problem with having prison because you're punishing people for something they can't control.
No, not necessarily. I give myself timeouts and things. Like if I catch myself on Facebook when I'm supposed to be writing a paper, I'm like, oh, okay, no social media for the next 20 minutes. And it's sort of like a prison.
Yeah, I guess, but maybe a little, maybe that's a different like
But, yeah, not as
level of
long.
intensity.
Yeah, not as long. I mean, we have a lot of research to show that people are way too so there's magnitude, duration, and latency for a consequence. Magnitude's how big or stressful it is, or how good it is, how much of it is. And duration is just like what it sounds, and latency means how shortly after the behavior. So prison is way too long latency. So like people are like, oh, I got in trouble. All right, well they don't go to prison for like a year. I don't know if people know that, but it takes a long time. You go to jail for a little bit, but you can post bail, and then you've got a hearing to see if it's even worthwhile. And then if it is, then you go to your trial, and even that you can get that pushed back for a while if your lawyer's trying to get your case together. I mean, the latency is forever. So it doesn't have that much, and the duration is just too long. We found that, like, even this is what's crazy. There was an old adage that said that however old your kid is how many minutes you should put them in timeout. There's no empirical basis to that, or there is. It's that the studies originally said, let's see if this works versus not doing it at all. But once they said, let's do a short timeout versus a 1 minute timeout, even up to like 10 years old, I think, versus his age appropriate minutes, and there was no difference. As it turns out, just being sat down like that is enough. But anyway, so prison is a little extreme whenever you're like 10 years? Just go to prison for like probably a year and they'll probably get it.
But Jeremiah, you got to get that guy off the streets.
Yeah, well, you do. But anyway, yeah. Oh, well. Yeah, so we're good.
Cool. Yeah, so check out the video. It's extra credits, gamification of Sesame something. Like Google those 3 words, you'll find it.
Yeah, it's definitely worthwhile to watch and to see what's going on with China, especially in the next 4 years. It's going to be implemented.
Yeah, 2020. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, cool. All right, man. I guess I'll let you off your phone and our listeners back to their holiday festivities. So
yeah. So next week will probably be our year in review. Our traditional, let's look at how the year was for gaming. And spoiler alert, not impressed with 2015.
Yeah, but we'll talk about the good, and we'll talk about what's coming up in 2016, which,
yes.
Holy crap, what a good year this is going to be.
Yes.
But until then,
a holly and jolly year.
All right, well, until then, guys, we appreciate it, and have a good time with your families and whatnot.